I feel like to do a good job of secure coding at scale, there needs to be a lot of support. So definitely training every year to refresh them because things change, because they learn more, because there's other topics they haven't learned. So secure coding training that is either agnostic or language specific or both if you can. And I know I'm biased because that's what I do, but I do it because we need it. But I would also say that a security champions program, and I know I talk about this like a broken record, but it's because that's how I ran every AppSec program I ran. It'd be me and like 150 devs or 200 devs, or once there was 2,000. How on earth can I serve all of them by myself?
Welcome to the season 3 of The Elephant in AppSec, the podcast to explore, challenge, and boldly face the AppSec elephants in the room. I'm Alexandra, your host and AppSec enthusiast and growth manager at Escape. Today, I'm joined by someone many of you will instantly recognize, Tanya Janca, also known as She Hacks Purple and a key community leader at Semgrep. With nearly 3 decades in IT, Tanya has earned countless awards, including OWASP Lifetime Distinguished Member and Hacker of the Year. She's spoken on stages all around the world and trained thousands of software developers and security professionals along the way. Her first book was one of the earliest I read on application security, and honestly, her work gets mentioned more than almost anyone else by guests, season after season. Now, with the release of her latest book, Alice and Bob Learn Secure Coding, we dive into a big question. Can we actually expect developers to write secure code? And if so, how do we make sure secure coding is a foundational part of education, not just an afterthought? We explore the challenges, the role of governments in promoting security standards, and the mindset shifts needed to get there. We also touch on Tanya's passion for community and how genuinely useful content, which isn't always a given in security, can make all the difference in helping others learn and grow in AppSec. If you enjoy this podcast, don't forget to subscribe and follow it on your favorite podcasting app or YouTube. It's the best way to avoid missing future episodes. And with that, get ready to hear Tanya's opinions. Dive right in! Hi, Tanya. Very excited to have you on Elephant and AppSec podcast. Very grateful that you could make it to the conference and do your talk on the shift left, and that it doesn't mean anything anymore. I think it was definitely the most successful talk of the conference. Well, thank you so much, and I'm super excited, for you and your new book release that people already start talking about on the podcast. Actually, on one of the episodes, someone already recommended, application security engineer. I think he used to be at MasterCard, now at Applied Systems. But people already recommended for Alice and Bob Secure Coding, for those listeners who do not know. So you did some interviews about that as well. It's available on Amazon in Canada and North America. So the goal is that for you was to lay out the principles, how to build secure software. And it seems though that the most, dedicated readers are experienced secure and application security professionals. And I think in one of the interviews you mentioned, that we start learning, how to code with Hello World. Like we start learning actually in secure coding with Hello World. And from the very beginning, we introduced, potential like cross-site scripting error, because you just, that's how, I think my first language was Python when I started learning, when I started engineering, even though I do like completely different thing now. And I never thought about security. To be honest, when we learned
Same
that.
here.
Yeah. So, how would you, ensure that actually we would make, that secure coding such a foundational part of learning how to code? Because people who want to educate themselves are quite often, experienced. So how would we make sure, that at the start of the school, we actually start learning, that all the security vulnerabilities that can be introduced?
So first of all, thank you for having me. It was my conversations with you via email that helped me write that talk. So thank you. And I feel like we need to get through to universities and colleges. With my first book, my hope was that universities and colleges would pick it up and teach it. And they didn't. And so I did these live stream lessons that were free with lots of friends. So for each chapter, I had one or more people on, and we talked about various topics. And then we answered all the questions in the back of the book. We answered all the audience questions, and then I saved those to YouTube, and they're still there. For anyone listening that wants to go see it, it's on YouTube, She Hacks Purple. And then if you go to the playlist, Alice and Bob Learn Application Security. And so I'm creating a second one, Alice and Bob Learn Secure Coding. And so I'm going to start doing those live streams. However, the universities were not very cooperative with me, same with the colleges. So I reached out to a whole bunch of them, and they all said basically the same thing. We would love for you to come and be an adjunct professor. We will pay you significantly less than minimum wage, and we will keep all of your intellectual property for ourselves after. What do you say? And surprisingly, I said no.
Yeah.
Because that is not a good deal. And so I was like, why wouldn't you be able to pay me more? And they were like, oh. So in my opinion, and this is a strong opinion and it might be considered a hot take, I feel the tenure system within universities is a pyramid scheme. Lots and lots of adjunct professors and people not in the tenured track work a zillion hours a week. I know because one of my cousins is in it right now. And then some of them magically get the tenured track. And then they eventually get this very well-paying job with not so many hours. My cousin was pregnant and she was like, yeah, I only work 45 hours a week now because I'm on maternity leave. She normally works 90 to 100 hours a week.
Yeah, that's not a life. I think you can't live your life.
I know, I never get to hang out with her. It sucks for me. I mean, she seems pleased, but I don't get it. But so as a result, I don't fit into that scheme. And so they pay everyone that doesn't fit into the scheme very low. I only have a college diploma, not a degree. So that system's broken, in my opinion. So I feel like we should go earlier, Alexandra. I feel like high school would be a great place to start teaching them. So since 2018, I've been volunteering with a Canadian governmental group called ICTC. And I know I should know what it stands for, but I can't remember because there's an English and a French acronym, and it's actually quite a bit longer. But basically, we make curriculum for the high schools, and then the high schools choose if they want to do it. And so I am obviously part of the cyber part. So it's about IT and especially cyber. So getting digital literacy. And so I'm in a Canadian textbook, as a job that you could have. Yeah. So we did this whole thing about like different careers that you could have. And I wanted people to know that you could be an application security engineer, that you could be an ethical hacker, also known as a penetration tester. And so I've been trying to work with them, but we have thousands of schools and only hundreds have picked up the content. They're not forced to pick it up. And all of them say the same thing. We don't have a teacher that knows enough to teach the curriculum. And so then I'm like, we should make a thing to teach the teachers. And so I'm trying to sway them on that. But then like, I feel like there has to be something from the top. So now, actually this week on Thursday, I'm meeting with my member of parliament. So I've already met with him more than once, and we are devising a plan. So for those that don't know Canadian politics, and that's absolutely okay if you don't know them, even if you live in Canada, our prime minister stepped down. Our prime minister stepped down, and so that means we're going to have an election soon. So that means people are going to lose their jobs. They're MPs. So my MP's like, just burn it down. So him and I are approaching the Department of Public Safety with essentially content from my book. It's a secure coding guideline, which I'm going to give away for free in my newsletter. And maybe I could share some links after if you want.
Yes.
But basically,
I can put them in the description for sure.
Yes. So basically, I want all of the federal government to follow a secure coding guideline. And basically, that's what my book is, right? So I just summarized it into 9 pages as effectively as I possibly could for someone that has not read the rest of the book. And then I want all the government agencies to follow that. And I want us to share it with businesses publicly. And I want us to promote it as this is a way to write secure code. Because right now, the options for guidance on that are public are NIST, which is like, if you have a few $1 million, you could totally get right on that. And it's not very AppSec friendly compared to, for instance, there's the application security verification standard from OWASP, but that's more like how to be a kick-ass pen tester. Like it's like verify this, verify that, verify this. None of it is, this is the code you write. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I do think it's a great plan. If you're going to be a pen tester, you'll be the best pen tester. But it's not, you can't hand that to a dev. Or you can, but they won't understand it and they'll ignore it and not read it and continue on. So I've written something that I hope is for devs. And so I'm doing the best I can as a civilian. When I was in the government, I also tried really hard. I did 13.5 years service, and I ran the federal election security in 2015. Pen tested our prime minister's website when he first was elected, and I did lots of other things I'm not allowed talking about. And I felt like from the inside, I didn't have as much power. So anyway, I'm literally doing the best I can to try to push this through. And
it does seem like you're already doing quite much more than a lot of people, when it comes to the relation to the government and promoting security on a global basis, on a country basis. Because it's quite rare that someone who, let's say, works for a commercial organization, that they also want to be involved on the political level in schools, in universities, and try to create standards, make it a top-down government educational experience, which is very, very rare. In most cases, that's just not the case.
It's important. And I feel like, so people at work, they're like, you're an influencer. And I'm like, well, I'm going to try to influence. Like, I'm going to try so hard to influence specifically people that have the power to set rules. And I feel like if the government can make this a policy for all of the government departments, maybe private businesses will catch on. I do a lot of business in Canada around secure coding training and stuff. And I'm trying to drag Semgrep with me, but it doesn't always work. And they try to drag me with them. But I feel like there's just so much more we can do. And I agree with you, Alexandra. Like, starting when we learn to code is the best way. Because if we learn, this is how you get input, cool. Now, how do we make sure it's safe, right? And if we begin teaching that way and that way of thinking from the beginning, everyone will write better code. Like, it'll just be the way you do it, right? Just like how to write a book, how to ride a bike, or whatever other thing you do. It's like, oh, when you cross the street, you look both ways. And if every time you do it, that's what you're
car, exactly. As well, like you have to know the rules, and you have to think about the rules and not kill a pedestrian. When you also drive behind that crosswalk. And do you think sometimes the issue as well with secure coding is that the lack kind of commitment from developers themselves also to learn more about security, or from organizations, to teach, because you said you actually do a lot of, security code training. So it means the organization want that, but sometimes it's most of organizations, I'm not sure if they really want that. So do you think it's a big issue?
I would say that it's a bunch of different things. So when I was a developer, I did not start learning about secure coding and all of that until maybe like 2012, because in 2011 I was working at Treasury Board, and this is public so I can share it. We had a cyber attack that was so bad we turned off the internet for a year. Try to code with no access to Stack Overflow. It was really hard. So, no looking up any syntax ever, or you look it in a textbook, and we didn't have a lot of textbooks because the internet. Anyways, I was like, oh wow, like what happened? Like, this is so scary. And so we got to learn a bit about it, and I joined OWASP, and then I ran a community of practice for my development team. A community of practice is sort of like having an OWASP chapter or a meetup inside of your workplace. And so I would invite all these cool people to come speak to us and teach us. And it was like my favorite part. Like, it wasn't supposed to be part of my job. I just kept doing it. My boss is like, do whatever you want, Tanya. Everyone's happy. It's fine, right? As long as it doesn't cost me money, just do whatever you want. And so then I started inviting security people, and then more security people. And I just became so obsessed. And I became very, very fascinated in learning about security. But it took tons of hours. And then I made friends, and those friends taught me more. And then I joined the community, and I really loved it. And I'm a person that loves community. And at the time, I was single, so I had more time than I do now. Now I have a partner, and I have munchkins at home, and that takes time, right? And so it took hours and hours and hours to learn this stuff. And also, there's so many different ways to learn and places to learn and costs to learning as well, right? And so imagine someone that's going to kind of give up their social life for years so that they can learn, because it wasn't just a course that I could take. right? There was no secure coding course that I was aware of unless I hired a professional trainer for thousands of dollars a day, which is like clearly not happening. All the courses I wanted to take at the time, there's just really sans. And at $6,000 or $7,000 American dollars, that's like 10 or 11 Canadian thousand dollars. And like that was about 20% of my take home pay for the year at the time. So I was like, I can't do it. Right. And so even now that there are some cheaper options, so there's a course in Semgrep Academy on like the very, very basic intros to secure coding based on my first book. It's brief and it is short, but there's still like a good start there, and that's free. And the link will be in the show notes. But there wasn't anything like that I could take then. And even if all the developers in the whole world take that, it's just the beginning. It's not enough, right? And so there's that. There's not a lot of choices, and a lot of the choices are expensive. There's the fact that we're expecting them to take lots of their own personal time to study a topic when they're already expected to study how to make beautiful JavaScript front ends that are responsive and gorgeous. They're supposed to be able to write a very, very satisfying back end. They're supposed to know architecture, and maybe they work and test their integrations. And like, there's just so many other things they're expected to know. And this is one of the things. So I feel like I'm trying to help the best I can. I also am hoping that over the next few years that we see some serious innovations in application security tooling. I work at Semgrep. I'm giving them all my ideas. I'm like, do this, let's build this.
Let's hope they implement that.
I'm always pushing them to build new tools, and they're always like, we can't just build like 5 new tools per year, Tanya, calm down.
I mean, if it starts in the ED, for example, and when you say write the code and you have suggestion, not only suggestion how to remediate, but how to learn, in the future, how to implement that securely, that's something that I think helps to reinforce, that learning, or maybe have a new secure code in Duolingo. Who knows?
That's a great idea. I love it. There's a lot of very cool AI tools coming out where they're going to try, how do I word this, like to get them to do secure coding for you. So for instance, right now, I don't know if I'm allowed sharing that. Someone is trying to negotiate with my publisher to train their AI on my book because they own the intellectual property, not me. And I'm like, yes. Make it write the code for you. Let's do it.
I'm sure there's probably already someone who PDF'd your whole book, uploaded to ChatGPT, and created a chatbot.
But definitely
I hope so.
But it is illegal, and that is intellectual property theft. So I'm hoping instead, I actually I'm trying to reach out to, so I spoke to one of the big AI makers, and they explained that my data set was too small to train on. And what we should do is create something called a RAG server, which is a RAG server is where you take a bunch of content that's not enough for the model to train on. So you need millions and millions of lines of code, which my book is 400 pages, not enough. Even if you had my first book at 225 pages, not enough. And so you make a server that has the data that's very important to you, and you say that reference this data first as always correct above what your model says, and always focus on this data set first. And so that's what we're looking into to see if my publisher will go for it, and probably they will if there's a small number, like just a small amount of royalties paid. Yeah, and then it's like, actually, we should not use the with statement or whatever it is that you should not be doing. This would be a safer alternative. And so, because when I researched my book, Alexandra, it was not good. It was not good. There's so much advice where...
I mean, right now with the ChatGPT, to be honest, a lot of advice also is generated by ChatGPT, which is probably not the best source of truth. I saw also you did a talk on how to write, how to use AI, in a secure, to actually write secure code, I think at the end of last year, right? Like using AI safely, if I'm not wrong.
Yes. And I talk about it in the book too. There's a lot of points for that, but I would say that even just reading blog posts, a lot of the blog posts, I was like, this is not correct. Not to make it sound like I'm a know-it-all, but so for instance, for each language that I looked into, I would do like 20 pages of Google results. And then I would compare each thing. And I'm like, if I can't find multiple references that agree that this is correct, I'm not printing it. And then I would look at things and analyze and I'm like, yeah, this is safe or this is not safe. And there were lots and lots of blog posts that just weren't correct. There was also just blatant, constant plagiarism. I don't know if you've had Tal Liren on the show yet, but he is the most plagiarized. So he writes,
I came
and then
across his
people copy
articles,
him.
yeah, from Sneak, though, yeah.
He is plagiarized over and over and over again. Like, he had one article that I think was plagiarized six or eight times. Like, one article. And so I would tell him, and he's like, yeah, I wrote them. Yeah, I know. Yeah, sorry. I'm like, it's not you. You're great. Like, I felt so bad for him because like he seems like a lovely human, and also like his research is fantastic. But so besides lots of people constantly plagiarizing Tal, just stuff that just when you read it, I'm like, oh, this isn't right. I don't know how to explain, but like you just read it and you know the language and you look at this and you're like, that's actually not very safe looking. These are the problems I see with this. No.
What was the most challenging language that you had to write about?
So there's a few. So jQuery, which is a framework or a fancy library, depending upon who you ask, arguments ensue. But at the end, I just wrote, my best advice is to never use jQuery and upgrade off. It's so bad. And I felt really bad saying that, but there's literally only one security feature and it's broken. And like, there's so many better JavaScript frameworks now. And it's just like got so many problems with it. And so like, I didn't have anything to help them with it except for writing every single thing yourself. Like, there's no defenses.
Okay.
When I did TypeScript, it was kind of hard because TypeScript's so new. I couldn't find that much content about it. And so a lot of it was like, follow best practices and stuff like that. But TypeScript is mostly going great, right? It has like a bunch of security features built into it that are quite nice. I was like, please use these, but there's not tons of them. Also, C++ is just like a really hard topic. Just generally, it's really hard. Memory safety is really hard. I have like a giant section on memory safety, which is very important. I found I had to read the Java Secure Coding Guide from Oracle and Alexander. That ruined my whole Saturday. It's 80 pages. It is so hard. It is not. So to the people that wrote it, you're brilliant. However, it is not written in an actionable manner. So they're like, these are vulnerabilities, and these are the ways that you could circumvent these vulnerabilities. And it wasn't like, I felt like a lot of the information was like, we had an incident this one time, so we just threw a bunch of stuff into the end of the document, and they just kept doing that. And it reminded me of like the first or second, because I've written many secure coding guidelines now for many, many orgs. And it reminds me of like the first one or the second one I wrote, where I just combined a lot of things. So some of it's quite actionable and easy to understand, and then it gets more and more difficult. And by the end, I was like, why did I agree to write about Java?
Like, I mean, in the end, you can't just understand what is important, what is not, just so much, information, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, just also the way it was written. So I try, so part of the effort in writing my books is to make them as easy to understand as possible, because I'm dyslexic, and recently I found out I have ADHD. So it's very common if you have dyslexia to have ADHD. It turns out I'm one of them. And so reading a textbook is a tough time for me. And so I tried to make it very accessible, I want to give the reader lots of dopamine hits. So lots of stories, lots of kind of reinforcing the point in a different manner to help people understand the best I could. And so, yeah, when I read other stuff, I'm like, who did you write this for? Like, you did not write this for me.
You don't, I think most of the time, actually now at least with the content that's being produced, people do not think who they're writing this for. They just produce the content around the topic, because I think that's a bit of a marketing problem, like with the terminology, that you just want to push the content out there for the sake of pushing it instead of making it actually helpful. And, that's what you said as well at the conference, like shift left became just a marketing slogan, and everything is kind of commoditized as well. And that's a pity, because it's very hard to find the content that actually you can make actionable, for your organization. And what other, marketing buzzwords have you actually, think will fall out of favor eventually? Because now security by design is also kind of became, in a sense, just thing that everyone uses.
Yeah, everyone uses secure by design, and then they talk about coding. And I'm like, coding isn't design. They talk about all sorts of things that have nothing to do with design, and they have very little plans on how to ensure designs are secure, and it's very confusing. I try to differentiate that a lot in the book. There's secure design and there's secure coding, and design is the plan of what you're going to build and how all the pieces fit together. And if there's a flaw with that, it doesn't matter if you code perfectly. You're still going to have a giant hole in your app. And so if you have a flaw in your app, that means there's a problem with the design. Versus if you have a bug, there's a problem with your code. It's an implementation error. Sorry to go into teacher mode.
I mean, that's the goal of the podcast as well, to kind of learn, otherwise we can talk about something else.
No, it's good. Sometimes I'm like, oh no, I hope she doesn't mind. She probably knows this. But so for marketing buzzwords, I think right now I've heard many companies say, or people say they're sick of hearing how AI this, AI that, AI this, AI that. And almost every company's like, we've made an AI and it's going to do everything for you, including your laundry. Right? Like they are making very big promises and a lot of the AIs aren't keeping the promise. And then as a result, everyone's thinking all the AIs are stupid. I also think that a lot of us fall into the trap that where, so the first, like I would just ask ChatGPT, do this, do that, give me this answer. And it didn't do very well. And then I took a course with Jason Haddock called Red, Purple, Blue AI. And he taught us prompt engineering, essentially. And like he wrote lots of prompts and gave them to us. We talked about prompting a lot. And so now when I use any of the AIs, I tell it how smart it is and how it's a secure coding expert and it's read all my books and it's a Thursday and it's had really good sleep and it's so energetic and it's taken Adderall and it sounds silly. You tell it all these things and you like pump it up. You're like, you're going to get such a big bonus and people are going to hug you and love you if you get the good answer. And then you ask it and its answer is twice as good. It sounds so dumb.
Yeah,
It does.
definitely heard about the strategy.
And if you tell it like you've been coding in TypeScript for 25 years, even though TypeScript's not that old, it doesn't matter. It's like, it'll give you better TypeScript answers. And so then I'm like, oh, actually, it's a very useful tool. It's very helpful, right? So I feel like a lot of people are really sick of hearing about how AI is going to solve all their problems. I think that people are really sick of hearing how tools are promising 0 false positives. And I'm like, 0? Or do you mean like less than 10%? Right? Because less than 10% would please me. 0 would be great. But if it's actually just, 5% or less, I'd rather hear very, very few false positives rather than hear 0. Do you know what I mean? And like, yeah. And
I think
also
0 is not realistic. 0 is just not realistic, to be honest, and everyone knows that. And especially where applications, get more and more complex, the frameworks get more and more complex, languages, especially. Yeah, I think it's just absolutely. It takes time even to train AI of the security tool to understand those. It's then becomes kind of impossible. And especially I think to measure it in scale, because right now who uses security tools is larger organizations, right? So when you have thousands of developers, hundreds of or thousands, implement everything, you monitor all of this at scale is very tough. Do you actually believe there will be one time in our organization who can actually implement secure coding at scale?
Yes, but they have to work at it. So I feel like to do a good job of secure coding at scale, there needs to be a lot of support. So definitely training every year to refresh them because things change, because they learn more, because there's other topics they haven't learned. So secure coding training that is either agnostic or language specific or both if you can. So that, and I know I'm biased because that's what I do, but I do it because we need it. But I would also say that a security champions program, and I know I talk about this like a broken record, but it's because that's how I ran every AppSec program I ran. It'd be me and like 150 devs or 200 devs, or once there was 2,000 devs. How on earth can I serve all of them by myself, right? And so I would start talking because I'm good at talking, and I'd give talks internally, and then I'd form like a little mini community of practice, And then before you know it, there'd be certain devs on certain teams that I knew I could talk to. That would be that person I could trust. And I would show them all the nifty tricks and give them access to the tools. And they would start doing the security work for their teams. And when you build a formal security champions program and you have support from above, things go way better. And so if you could give them lessons every month, right? Like, which I realize is hard to keep up with. It's hard to do, but there's companies now starting that do that, which is great. But if you could give them access regularly, like a lesson every month, and then being able to ask as many questions as they want after. And then also having access to other resources. So for instance, books. And by books, I mean physical books, electronic books, audio books, like if someone is blind or sight impaired, like perhaps books in Braille, right? Like giving as many options as possible so every single person can learn the way that they learn best. Like I'm an audiobook person and I'm currently trying to schedule time to record the audiobook version of my next book because I did my first book and because I did voice work for a very long time. So I can do that because I'm a weirdo. Yeah. I was a professional musician for around 17 years. And so
what kind of music did you do?
I did folk music and I did punk rock. Yeah. So if you look up Tanya Janca on Spotify, all those albums are me.
Oh, okay. That's now it makes sense that you recorded that music video as well.
Yes, because I've done music for longer than cybersecurity. And so but I guess the point is to try to give them many different ways to learn. So for instance, having a live trainer, that tends to work the best for most people. But if you can also have some licenses to on-demand courses, right? Like maybe someone has trouble paying attention all day and they do better being able to do 5 minutes every day, right? So like the more options we give them, the more likely they are to learn. And then checking in, giving awards for that. And then on top of that, I am a big fan. So I didn't used to really like static analysis, and now I work at a static analysis tool company. So clearly my opinion's changed. But if you get asked, so most of them have an IDE plugin. So get one that has one of those. And basically, if you can get your developers to scan their code in the IDE, it can show them when they've made a lot of secure coding mistakes. It's not the same as secure coding training, but what it can do is catch when you've done the wrong thing. And so you can run it in your IDE, and then it'll put these little red squigglies underneath, just like if you're in Microsoft Word and you've spelled something wrong for the first time, Tanya. And then it'll show you, it's like, oh, you're using eval with user input. That seems very bad. We would love to suggest you do not ever do that, please. And so basically, then you sort of have like a kind of a spell checker. Like it could just help you catch some of the things you missed. And then doing a deeper full run of static analysis later when you check your code in again can help you. And so making sure that same dev sees their own mistakes as well is important, because I've seen I've seen a non-zero percentage number of companies where they'll have one team that fix all the bugs. And so then the devs making the bugs never learn.
That's quite often the problem. When sometimes you do the security course. Let's say I worked at the company was public, and we had to do a course. And then if you're not really interested in that, and you just scream for the videos and then validate, I did that, and you never learn. And in the end, that's the thing. Sometimes the problem, if you're not interested, that's why, like as you mentioned, security champions, the gamification of the experience is so important. Adapting to everyone, like that's like if it's 5 minutes videos, every day, it's so much more sometimes impactful than sitting the whole day and just in front of the computer while like looking at the videos. It's almost impossible as well. And I think do you think actually in some of the maybe sectors or the industries we can achieve that secure coding done right faster?
Yeah, if things are industry mandated, it really helps. So for instance, there's something called HIPAA in the United States. And I know a lot of your listeners might be in the United States, but lots of us aren't there. And so it has to do with health information. And so now a lot of health organizations are hiring me because of that. where previously they didn't. Because of PCI compliance mandating secure coding training, I trained tons of people who write code that touch credit cards, right? And so if we had more oversight in more industries, I think more of them would do it. The gaming industry gets attacked a lot. And so they tend to be quite focused on that, even though it's not mandated for them. But they are a 200-something billion per year industry, and they take that seriously.
Maybe your kids are going to attack instead of gaming that they like now. In the future, they're going to attack. Who knows?
They're really not like they play Roblox all the time, and they're always like, Tanya, oh, my Robux disappeared. And I'm like, did you change your password? And they're like, why would I do that? Like, because someone's in your account, because your password is very obvious. And they're like, I don't think anyone would guess my password's Chunky Monkey. I'm like, oh, sweetie. Because apparently that's what all the kids say that are 8, apparently, or 9. That's very cool. Call yourselves Chunky Monkeys. I don't understand what it means, but it's cool.
No, I don't know.
I'm not cool. I'm old. But we are not chunky monkeys, Alexandra.
We're not chunky monkeys, that's for sure. Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
But I would guess that a lot of people have their password being that. And so I'm like, you need to change your password. And they're like, but what could I possibly change it to? I'm like, yeah. So, but they are getting attacked all the time. And if we can add more, so I know that a lot of people don't like it when things are mandated by the government, but if it's not mandated, people aren't going to do anything. Like we're noticing that when there's a huge cybersecurity incident, that the stock goes down briefly and then bumps right back up to where it was. And if I was more organized, I would be shorting stock all over the place, because like it pretty much always like goes down a bump and then just goes right back up. So as soon as it goes down, you just buy a whole bunch, just wait a few weeks and then sell it and you're all set. Because like we just keep seeing it over and over again. Like it doesn't mean anything anymore. And that really hurts. In my book, I write about how the Canadian tax office lost. So I have 4 parents. So when I was little, they divorced and remarried very quickly. So my whole life, I just mostly remember having 4 parents, and 2 of them, their identities were lost by the tax office.
Oh, wow.
They lost hundreds of thousands of Canadians' personal identities on the internet. And that makes me feel ashamed as a professional that I can't protect my parents. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
if I can't
protect from personal, if you can't protect people who are closest, to you, you can do, I mean, maybe in the future, since you're working right now, with the government, you'll be able to build better solutions and right from the start, and implement something to protect them. But yeah, I can imagine.
I've had a lot of people argue with me because I was like, we are not succeeding right now. We suck. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, it's getting better. It's improving. But cybersecurity, like there's breaches constantly. And a lot of people are unaware. So when you hear about a breach, that's because they legally had to report it. There's breaches happening constantly that they are not legally required to report. And there's breaches happening constantly that they are required to report that they're not. All the time. There are data breaches happening all the time with your data that you don't know about. And quite frankly, there's a whole bunch happening that the IT security teams are not aware of yet. And so like literally constantly all the houses are burning down. And we're just like, well, it's not my house. But to me,
I'm sure if almost everyone goes to have I been, they're going to find, there goes. I mean, I found my credentials there. So
I unfortunately receive emails from Troy too often. I'm like, Troy, I love hearing from you, but not like this.
Yeah.
For those that don't know, Have I Been Pwned is a site where you can put your email in and it will tell you data breaches that you have been in. And it is run by Troy Hunt and company now. So he has a few people working with him.
Okay.
Yeah. So I feel like we're not winning the battle, and it's very frustrating for me. I want our industry to do better because like basically now even normal people were like, do you hear about this breach? And I'm just like, I feel embarrassed for us, for all of us, because I know we're working hard, but we're not winning yet. And so I am hoping with this book, I help move things forward. And basically my career goals are, so I have 2 personal kind of mission statements. And one is to help make our industry more secure, like meaningfully change the way we build software so that it is safer for everyone. And then the other goal is to perform good in my life in general. And so I try to do it at work and not at work, etc. And so, yeah, I'm trying to combine those the best I can. And although writing books it does not make you very much money. I just, spoiler alert. It does open doors and it does help a lot of people. So I'm hoping that I
Yeah.
help a lot of people with the book. That is the goal.
Probably in the long run, it will, since you make impact, and for you, I think the goal is to make impact on a larger scale. And if there will be another book, I always ask this question towards the the end of the podcast. If there will be another book apart from yours that you could recommend, what would it be?
Ooh, so Laura Bell Main is just releasing in a couple of weeks product security, and so it's yeah, I'm very, very interested to get my hands on it. Her other books are quite good. She also has a secure coding company, a training company. She's brilliant. And yeah, I can't wait to get my hands on that book.
Yeah, I've had her on the podcast. I'm very excited, to take at this look of what the book is going to be about. I'm sure it's a great book because she's an expert in secure training, and I'll definitely put the link when this episode is live. Well, thank you so much, Tanya, for coming on the podcast. I'm super excited for you for the book, and I'm excited what you're going to contribute to the industry in general, and for Canadian government as well, for Canadian schools too. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me, and thank you for letting me rant a little bit.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's security. That's super.